So I want to start this segment by telling everyone watching this video and watching my live stream, I am not an expert. I am not an expert on this subject, okay, at all. So I highly recommend if you watch my segment and you still feel a little bit confused, because at this point, as I'm recording the segment, I'm a little bit confused as well. I highly recommend doing more research into this. And if you find anything that you think I would like to know or that you think is missing from this segment, please leave a comment or, in the live chat. If I miss something or miss a detail, feel free to let me know. So there is a imminent rail strike going on. Now, what that means is railway workers, are wanting to go on strike. And again, railways are often used for the supply line to ship goods from one area of the country. Let's say something is imported in Florida and it wants to be, travel, go all the way up to Maine or something. They'd use a railway for that. And because the United States supply line is so dependent on these rails, the United States government has power to intervene in negotiations here. I don't know why. From my understanding, I read a couple of sources. I have a Vox article here I want to read that has a little bit of history in it. But again, I am not an expert on why the U.S. government intervenes or can intervene or is intervening. But anyway, I want to read this from Vox because I thought this is, it's got some good information in here and I'm going to go off of it. A potential rail strike has Democrats in an awkward bind. Rail workers are upset they don't have paid sick days. Congress probably won't help. On Monday evening, President Joe Biden urged Congress to end the risk of a potential rail strike that could bring U.S. commerce to a halt by forcing labor unions to accept an agreement the administration helped negotiate. Now, when you think of the word agreement, what do you think of? Think to yourself. Just spitball. Say it in the comment section. Say it in the chat. Agreement. Agreement to me indicates every party involved has reached a compromise that they're okay with. So, there is no agreement. So, anyone telling you that there is an agreement reached is lying. They are lying to you. If there was an agreement reached, we wouldn't be in this situation. If there was an agreement reached, Congress wouldn't be doing anything. If there was an agreement reached, Joe Biden wouldn't be making a statement. Now, once again, Joe Biden calls himself the most pro-labor president in history. Now, I think FDR would have a couple of words with that. But let's be honest. Up until now, has Joe Biden really had... maybe he said a couple nice words about the Amazon union drives. He had Chris Smalls at the Oval Office, right? But up until now, has he really had to do anything? Has he really had to weigh in on anything? Other than just lending some kind words? Up until now, the answer is really no. It's all virtue signaling, right? And, once again, I want to remind everyone.
I am not up to the job. And I mean that sincerely. It's not like, whoa.
Quote, I am calling on Congress to pass legislation immediately to adopt the tentative agreement. Now, what does tentative mean? Tentative agreement? What? It's not tentative and it's not an agreement, right? But again, between railroad workers and operators without any modifications or delay to avert a potentially crippling national rail shutdown, Biden said in a statement. The Biden administration averted a rail strike in September by brokering a deal that increased worker pay, but that failed to address concerns on-call workers have about paid sick days. Now you might be wondering, paid sick days? Okay, think about this. Now, 4 of the 12 rail unions involved in the contract ratification discussions are pushing for more negotiations. Those 4 unions, which represent 55% of the rail workers affected by an agreement, have rejected the deal because it doesn't offer the paid sick time they've asked for. Currently, rail workers do not receive any paid sick days and have to use vacation time. Now again, all the while, we are in the midst of a pandemic where the third leading cause of death in the United States of America is COVID-19. And one of the, according to the government, this is a vital part of the supply chain. And they don't get any sick days in the middle of a pandemic while the White House is pretending COVID's over. Now again, this is all part of the conspiracy that we're no longer in a pandemic. If we're not in a pandemic, why do these whiny babies need sick days? Am I right? Eight unions have supported the agreement, which also contained a 24% pay increase over 5 years and one additional personal day. Oh, one additional personal day. Wow. But all 12 of the unions, which cover more than 115,000 workers, would participate in the event of a strike since they're unlikely to cross each other's picket lines. It's just... what is the logic? Now, I need you to understand. Efficiency, right? Getting the same job done in a less amount of time is sacrificed. They don't care about efficiency. GDP. They don't care about the GDP, right? They don't care about reducing cost. They don't care about productivity. They care about control, and they care about enslaving their workforce. That's what it is. Because there is no other metric, no business metric, right? No financial metric that supports this decision to not give workers paid sick leave. None. Zero. Not a single one. Every single possible. Now you might be confused. How is that? Oh, they work less for the same amount of pay. Wouldn't that cost more money? Well, again, when you treat workers better, they're more productive, which means they do more work in a less amount of time, which means you don't go to work while sick and then everyone gets sick and then they go to the hospital and then the whole industry shuts down, right? So again, every metric, I'm not joking, every single metric, productivity, GDP, efficiency, etc., they are all sacrificed in favor of control, power, and enslavement. The capitalist class doesn't care about making more money. They care about having a wider monetary gap in between them and the workers. That's all they care about. The numbers are irrelevant to them. Oh, how many commas, how many zeros? That's not as relevant as how little commas and how little zeros the worker has. Biden is pushing Congress to act quickly as the deadline to reach an agreement is December 9. And he doesn't think negotiations are heading toward a settlement. Why is that? Now, again, this is the pro-labor guy. Why doesn't he do legislation in support of the workers and say, hey, these big bosses, what the fuck is wrong with you? Give workers their sick days. Why is it that, oh, they can't reach an agreement, so I have to choose the side that has all the power at the expense of the workers? Why is that? Why is it that when they're on that fence, that they always fall on the side of the capitalist class? Why is it that every time they're on the fence, every time the wind blows in both directions, right? But every single time they fall on that side, they fall on the side of serving power? Biden's demand only addressed one way that Congress could respond. However, lawmakers could agree to Biden's request, which Speaker Nancy Pelosi has already indicated she plans to do, and require the unions to accept the existing agreement. How is that possible? Now I ask you this. How? How is this possible? How is it possible that the United States government can intervene and say you are not allowed to strike? What happens if they strike? Did they go to jail? What happens if they strike anyway? Now, again, I support them striking regardless of what happens. If they go to jail, I will support a bail fund. If they get fired, I will donate to whatever cause, and I will dictate that my audience donate to whatever cause is necessary for them to alleviate their, strike funds, whatever, right? How the fuck is the United States government going to get involved in this? Now, again, all of this, the dangerous delays, blah, 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 the supply chain, again, all of the hand-wringing and crying, you can make all of those same arguments in support of the workers and against the bosses. You can say, oh, why are the bosses being so fucking ridiculous? They're not giving the workers any sick leave? Don't they know that the supply chain is at risk? Right, so again, all of the talking points, they could easily be used for either position. So why is it that they're using that style of talking point in support of the bosses? Now, again, this is the interesting part about this. And again, I want to learn more about this as well. And if anyone knows any additional information about this this subject, I would appreciate, whatever direction you want to point me in, I'll look into it. Normally, Congress cannot end a strike or become too involved in private industry labor disputes. But because the U.S. supply chain and economy are so dependent on rail, the Railway Labor Act was passed in 1926 to give Congress the authority to curtail strikes and resolve them if they do happen. It hasn't used this power frequently, and the most recent application of it was roughly 30 years ago when Congress acted to end a rail strike in 92. At the time, Congress lawmakers passed a resolution setting up an arbitrary system to address disputes between workers, arbitration system to address disputes between workers and the railroads. The Railway Labor Act gives lawmakers a lot of leeway over how they can approach the current situation. Now again, a lot of leeway, which means they could side on the side of the workers. They choose not to. They choose not to side with the workers. Quote, given that they have the power to force a settlement, I don't think there are any limits on that, says Cliff Winston, an economic policy expert at Brookings. I'm sure this guy has a lot of really interesting things to say. In practice, they could require the unions and carriers to accept the September agreement as is, an option Biden and business leaders are advocating for. They could impose additional conditions of their own, including the requirement of paid sick time, taking workers' reason for striking off the table. They could extend the existing cooling off period so both sides have more time to negotiate, or they could turn the talks over to an independent arbitrators who would be tasked with finding a resolution. Now again, Democrats are going to lose the House. This is it. This is the lame duck period for Democrats. This is how the American people are going to remember the Democratic Party as it was in power. Think about it. This is their final act. This is their final bow to the American people. From this point on, from January 3rd on, our government is in permanent gridlock. This is the Democrats' swan song to the American people. They're saying, well, when push came to shove, at the 11th hour, we fucked you in the ass. Any resolution would need the support of 60 members in the Senate, including 10 Republicans. Getting that backing ultimately could limit which option lawmakers decide to take. Senator Bernie Sanders has emphatically said that congressional action should not omit paid sick time. Bernie Sanders is advocating for 7 days of paid sick leave, which is the middle ground in between 15 and 0. The unions are advocating, the workers, I should say. A lot of the union leaders in this instance are not so great, but the workers are advocating for 15 days of sick time. Bernie Sanders is trying to meet in the middle. Personally, I'm not convinced on Bernie's strategy here. I think his strategy is that he wants to try to pick off Republicans and pressure Democrats, and that in order to do so, 7 is that's his strategy. I'm not convinced. I want to know why that was his strategy. I would love if Bernie Sanders is asked a question on whatever media he goes on, whatever show he goes on, whatever, why he did 7 instead of 15. Because I'm sure he's got a reason. There is a reason why he's not wanting to advocate for the full 15 paid sick days. I just want to know what the reason is. Right? And again, either way, 7 is better than 0. That's true. But 15 is better than fucking 7, and the workers want fucking 15. So that, I'm just, Quote, if the rail industry can afford to spend $25.5 billion this year to buy back its own stock and hand out huge dividends to its wealthy shareholders, please do not tell me it cannot afford to guarantee paid sick days to its workers and provide them with decent quality of life, he wrote in a post last week. Senator Marco Rubio. Say that again. Senator Marco Rubio has spoken out about finding a deal that incorporates more worker demands. Now, again, do I think Marco Rubio genuinely supports this? No. He is doing a branding exercise to try to peel off voters away from Democrats, and it's working. It works. It works. Think about it. Joe Biden, the self-avowed most pro-labor president in American history, is getting outflanked by Marco fucking Rubio? It's a total disaster. Now, again, if Joe Biden weren't an egomaniacal piece of fucking human garbage, he would see the reaction to what he's been saying over the last couple days and backtrack. He would go like, you know what? Fuck it. You're right. I was wrong. They need more sick days. That's what he would do. You think Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer would buck the president? Maybe. Call him out. But Joe Biden, he's, again, an egomaniac. He's not going to backtrack. Even though he knows that this is going to make him unpopular, he is so afraid, his narcissism is so afraid of backtracking and admitting that he was wrong, that he's just going to fucking, again, brute force all the way through. Previously, though, Republican Senators Richard Burr and Roger Wicker pushed a resolution that would force workers to adhere to the contract without changes. And Pelosi has already said that the House will vote on legislation this Wednesday, that's today, that would push workers to accept this existing contract. Quote, this week, the House will take up a bill adopting the tentative agreement. Again, it's not tentative and there is no agreement. Again, the word tentative, right, that immediately undoes the word agreement. An agreement is where all sides reach a compromise. You cannot have a tentative agreement. You can have like the last point of negotiation, right? And then, you go from one direction to the other. It's like tug of war, but there's no tentative agreement. That doesn't exist. That's not a thing. It's not real. That's made up. But do Americans know what tentative means? Do they know what agreement means? No, Americans are fucking illiterate monsters, right? They're zombies. They don't fucking know anything, so. With no poison pills or changes to the negotiated terms, and send it to the Senate, she said in a statement. It is my hope that this necessary strike-averting... Now again, necessary, correct. Strike-averting legislation, correct, will earn a strongly bipartisan vote. It is necessary, and it is strike-averting, but again, they could fall on the side of the workers. They could fall on the side of the bosses. All the talking points of how necessary it is, how it could damage the economy, it's made up. It has nothing, logically speaking, it has nothing to do with their decision of voting in favor of the bosses. The level of damage to the U.S. economy has nothing to do, right, with their final decision to support the bosses. So when they go out there and say the U.S. economy is at risk, it's at risk, it's at risk, oh, we're going to have economic collapse or whatever, that has nothing to do with their position. They made it up. And Americans are too fucking stupid to really get this shit. Biden referred to himself as a proud pro-labor president, blah, blah, blah. So I want to play this. Was circulating the rounds on Twitter.com. This is a compilation of CNN clips. This is how CNN is treating this situation. Now, again, the 1926 Railway Labor Act, whatever it is, gives Congress the power to err on the side of the bosses or on the side of the workers. And again, none of these arguments support their decision to vote in favor of bosses. This is misdirection. This is purposeful disinformation. Right? The point of disinformation, right, is to send you off in a spiraling confusion in a direction that makes it so that you can't properly engage in the logic. None of this has anything to do with their decision to vote in favor of bosses. None of it. None of it. But watch this shit.
a rail strike is one of the
I gotta fucking boost the audio here.
A rail strike is one of the most disruptive and expensive things that can happen to an economy.
A rail shutdown or strike would disrupt supply chains.
A strike means food prices could skyrocket.
Many experts are saying would be an economic catastrophe.
Now again, all of what they're saying, I need you to understand this. All of what they're saying is factually true. This whole compilation is 100% factually true. And yet, it is still disinformation because they're all saying this stuff in support of the decision to vote in favor of bosses, which it has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with the decision to vote in favor of the bosses. Right? This is purposeful disinformation. Right? This is like when, again, Republicans love to use the word facts. Oh, I just care about facts. I care about facts. But they say facts in contexts that don't even make any sense. It's purposefully misleading. And that is why it qualifies as disinformation. Yes, this strike could destroy the U.S. economy. What does this have to do with the decision to vote in favor of the bosses? It has nothing to do with that.
That could mean a big shortage and massive price hikes. Even gas prices could increase.
And it also could cost the economy $1 billion within the first week.
That would cripple the economy.
I'm not setting aside the concerns of your members, but are you and your members willing to stop the rails, in effect, and accept those costs to the U.S. economy?
Why is it that unions are the ones destroying the economy and not the bosses that are, again, abusing the workforce? Isn't that strange? It's always the unions. In a pandemic, again, all of this, think about this. I know that mainstream media, I know that all of your family members, I know every podcast on YouTube has completely entered pandemic denialism. I'm one of the only people that actually cares about, health and well-being in the world. And I hope that everyone in my chat agrees with me, right, on that. But all the while, the third leading cause of death in this country is COVID-19. What are the 1 and 2 leading causes of death? Heart disease, which is, again, a group of hundreds of different diseases. So can you really say that that's the leading cause of death? And cancer, again, another grouping of hundreds of different diseases, right? COVID-19, one singular disease. So you can make the argument that COVID-19 is the leading cause of death if you decouple and degroup the first and second leading causes of death being heart disease and cancer, right? So again, that's debatable. Again, it's a cluster of different kinds of diseases. It's easier to, to explain that in charts and stuff. But you can make the argument that COVID is the leading cause of death in this country. All of this is happening because rail workers want more than 0 paid sick days. In a pandemic where there's 1 million dead motherfuckers.
Do you believe a strike is worth it if it cripples the U.S. economy and costs up to $2 billion?
Do these fucking morons not understand leverage? Now again, whatever the workers do, if they do strike, even if it means that they get fired and, Congress hires a bunch of scabs, right? I will support them. Strike funds, I will give them whatever I can. I would love to have people on my show to interview them if they're on the picket lines. This is called leverage. These so-called brain geniuses don't know basic negotiating tactics and terms. It's leverage. What this whole compilation is basically just explaining the leverage that the unions have.
A day.
More than $2 billion per day.
Is it worth it?
And on top of all of that, the holidays are right around the corner.
So a little less.
Oh, the holidays. People have to buy their stupid fucking corporate trinkets for their stupid fucking goddamn kids and grandkids. Dear heavens. How are we going to buy our 15th wreath when the supply line is being destroyed by the unions? The bosses. Are they going to invite bosses on? Nah. It's always the unions. It's always their fault.
Less than a month right before Christmas here.
Especially right before the holidays.
President Biden warning if that happened, It would devastate the economy if we had a strike like that. So joining me now to talk.
And again, all true. That's the thing. Someone can say something that is 100% factual, and in the context of the situation, it can still be blatant, malicious disinformation. And that's what this is. That's what this compilation shows. It is blatant, disgusting, malicious disinformation, and yet 100% factual.
Talk about this and a lot more is Bank of America. It's Brian Moynihan, chairman and CEO, one of the biggest banks in the world.
That's a good way to end it there. So again, I am not the most educated person when it comes to the Railway Labor Act or whatever it is. I would like to do more research on this. But again, this all happening during a pandemic because workers don't want to deal with 0 sick days. 0. This so-called tentative agreement, which isn't a thing. There is no such thing as a tentative agreement. Doesn't exist. Has 0 sick days in a pandemic where debatably the leading cause of death is COVID-19. And again, all of what this compilation showed, all of what Joe Biden, the Democrats are talking about, they wouldn't have to change their talking points. Think about how easy it is. They don't have to readdress their talking points. They don't have to do any redrafting. They could say the same fucking shit and just side with the workers. This is all purposeful misdirection and disinformation. And again, this is what Democrats have to say in the last month before Republicans destroy this country with gridlock. Right? This is what they have to say. Is fuck you. I love your boss. Go fuck yourself. That's what they have to say to people like you. They don't fucking care about you. Now again, Republicans don't care about you either. But they're going to weaponize this to try to get some good branding. They're going to weaponize this to try to get some good fundraising dollars off of it at the expense of the so-called self-acclaimed most pro-labor president in American history. It's sad. It's pathetic. And again, the American zombies care more about the holidays than their fellow American. Gotta get my grandkids some stupid fucking garbage. Because what else are we going to do for Christmas? It's pathetic. This country is fucking pathetic. Americans are fucking pathetic. Our politicians are fucking pathetic. It's just that simple.